2 years ago, the world watched as South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un joined hands and stepped over the demarcation line that splits two Koreas. It was the first inter-Korean summit in 11 years, reviving hope for improved cross-border ties, but more crucially, a stepping stone for denuclearization talks between the United States and North Korea. But since then, talks have been stalled, and amid the coronavirus pandemic, it seems dialogue won't be resuming for the time being. But we look back on the last 2 years and discuss whether the denuclearization agenda could make it back on the table. Today, I'm joined by Nilsson-Wright, Senior Lecturer at the University of Cambridge, Chun In, former Lieutenant General and Commander of the Special Warfare Command of the Republic of Korea Army, and Mark P. Barry, a North Korea analyst based in New York. My first question to you, Dr. Nilsson-Wright. It's been 2 years, but other than these flashy photos and some vague documents promising cooperation, we haven't yet seen a denuclearization deal. Would you say that there has been meaningful progress in relations since then, or have we actually regressed to square one?
Well, if you remember, that historic declaration 2 years ago had three components. One, the idea of improving bilateral relations between the two Koreas. Two, the reduction of military tensions and the reduction of the risk of armed conflict breaking out. And third, as you rightly emphasized, the importance of denuclearization and a formal peace regime. I think it's fair to say that the progress has been minimal. We've seen some improvement in ties between the two countries, two Koreas, a flurry of meetings between senior leaders, 3 meetings between the two Korean leaders, 3 meetings between Donald Trump and his North Korean counterpart. But beyond that, that very important symbolic progress, I think on the fundamentals, there's been very limited progress. The critical issue here, of course, is the sticking point over denuclearization. We saw, of course, the failure of the Hanoi summit back in February of 2019. And it was the failure to make any substantive progress in those critical talks that I think underlines the absence of progress. If that wasn't bad enough, of course, we've seen a ratcheting up of military tensions, beginning in March with a flurry of short-range ballistic missile tests by the North Koreans, and the fact that the sanctions regime, the international sanctions regime supported by the United Nations, the tough position by the United States, all of that adds up to a real deadlock. And of course, Kim Jong-un himself in December of last year said very unambiguously, failure to make progress with the United States would mean that the North Koreans would consider in principle that they could go ahead with more missile launches and even further progress in their efforts to advance their nuclear program. So it's a very pessimistic outlook. And I think for now, at least, we have to conclude that we're a long way from making progress on these critical talks.
Right, so we've seen a lot of great optics and possibly some excitement on Twitter, but not much real progress, I suppose. Well, General Chun, North Korea actually had a busy March conducting 9 missile tests, despite the fact that the United States and South Korea cancelled their joint air drills last year. What message is the regime sending with these kind of low-level provocations?
Well, North Korea has 2 audiences they must address. First is the external international audience. And I think they're telling the international community that we're still alive, we can withstand your sanctions, and we can modernize. They're demonstrating their capabilities, military capabilities, and to be frank with you, it's quite impressive and intimidating. Secondly, they have their own people that they must cater to. And to them, they're telling them that everything is fine, our military is strong. And I think indirectly, they're reminding their people that they still have an enemy that they must confront. So they're making these, conducting these demonstrations with all of these messages in mind. And I'm also saying that probably they are trying to show their potential buyers systems that they have these kind of capabilities for export.
So you really see this as a show of force by the North Koreans. Well, Dr. Barry, it looks like President Trump, though, he hasn't been too worried about the flurry of provocations. In fact, his North Korea agenda seems to have taken a backseat as he now faces this coronavirus pandemic, as well as his plans to win re-election. So is it likely that there will be some kind of high-profile meeting before November? And actually, just how important is this Trump-Kim dynamic to reaching a deal?
The dynamic is important because they have a personal relationship which is separate from the disagreements between the two countries. So that's always ongoing. And that's why whenever President Trump says he got a nice note, you know, however long ago it was, there is some sort of personal communication going on. However, I think the president's position is that we had the opportunity to begin bilateral negotiations last October. It was broken off on the same Saturday, first Saturday of October. They haven't been picked up since then, and therefore the administration had been sending out the message, particularly, I believe, to the South Korean press, that there will not only be no more summits between now and Election Day in November, but also do not expect there to be any summits if the president is reelected. So I think the president's clear message has been, let's get back to the negotiating table. We already have the people identified who would be engaging each other, and we know what has to be done. So it's your next move. That's the U.S. position, I believe.
I see. Well, back here on the Korean Peninsula, well, the two Koreas agreed to ease military tensions along the border in 2018. But General Chun, do you think both sides have been keeping their side of the bargain? And what should a lowering of military tensions look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so from the summit, if you can find one silver lining, it could be this comprehensive military agreement or the 19 September agreement, fondly referred to by the Koreans. So I say this because for the past 18 months, although there have been military missile launches, modernization of North Korean weapon systems, along the DMZ and the seas, east and west, there's not been a single incident between the two Koreas. This is unprecedented since the armistice of 1953. Now, there has been much criticism for the comprehensive military agreement because people were surprised and they were not ready for this. On the conservative side, there are many who believe that South Korea gave up too much. It still has to be seen. But right now, so far, for the past 18 months, the fact of the matter is we have not seen any kind of just or tensions rising up. For the future, I think that the thing that we would really appreciate is withdrawal of mutual military forces along the DMZ. Now, the North Koreans have 70% of their forces amassed in that area with a large quantity of artillery targeting the capital city of Seoul. So if they were to withdraw that, that would be a significant direction towards stability.
Right, so you feel that there has been progress in terms of easing military tensions and there could be potentially more ways to build peace across the border. Well, over the past week, Dr. Nilsson-Wright, there have been some rumours that the North Korean leader is gravely ill. That's something that the South Korean presidential office has denied, though. Why do you think these speculations have been springing up, and what does it mean for the future of the denuclearization if Kim Jong-un's health is actually in danger?
Well, the proximate cause for these rumours is, of course, the fact that we haven't seen Kim Jong-un in public since April the 11th. And most strikingly of all, of course, his failure to appear in public on April 15th, the anniversary of the birth of Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, and of course the grandfather of the current leader, created a great deal of speculation. But this is essentially all that we know at the moment. Speculation fueled by reports in a Hong Kong newspaper and also in the Japanese press that have suggested that the leader might have undergone heart surgery that went wrong, and some people have speculated that he might be in a coma. All of this has led to wider speculation about his vulnerability because of his poor health, the fact that he's a heavy smoker, he's a diabetic, He's overweight. But we have no substantive, credible evidence to say that these rumours are in fact supported by concrete evidence. And the reports from not only South Korea, but also from the US suggest that he is in fact alive. One other possibility to explain his absence from the public gaze is that he may himself, of course, in the midst of the coronavirus, be concerned for his own health, limiting his public appearances. But again, that is very much simply speculation.
So
and I think for now at least, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so well, it's really hard to tell what's going on inside the regime. It looks like we're in for some prolonged time of uncertainty. But finally, before we go, Dr. Barry, what can South Korea do then to revive this denuclearization momentum or a resumption of talks between the US and North Korea as South Korea helped fulfill 2 years ago?
The best role that President Moon has played is in brokering the summits. And perhaps he's a little bit more strengthened now that the elections were held less than 2 weeks ago. His party won a resounding victory. But the problem is there's very little he can contribute in terms of the bilateral nuclear negotiations with the United States. Furthermore, I think Kim or whoever may be leading the North at the moment is aware that the president has put a lot of pressure on South Korea to vastly increase its contribution to the cost of maintaining U.S. forces Korea. And the president himself personally rejected the latest ROK offer, which to me was quite surprising. And I predict that if he is reelected, he will probably, you might say, retaliate against the lack of an agreement with the South on cost sharing by withdrawing a certain number of troops to be commensurate with what amount that the South has not paid. So if I were Kim or whoever's leading the North, I would take note of that and realize that there will be a change of the correlation of forces around the peninsula, and the United States may be withdrawing further into itself than it was in a first Trump term. So that's my biggest concern right now.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Nilsson-Wright in Paris, former Lieutenant General Chun in Seoul, and Dr. Mark Barry in New York.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is also where we wrap up the show today. To our viewers around the world, thank you for starting your week with us. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more global insights on issues making headlines. Bye-bye.